So hello everybody, I think we're ready to get started because I know time is tight. So welcome, we're so excited to have you all here. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then introduce the secretary. And then we are going to get started with our community conversation tonight. So I'm here really wearing two different hats. I am the president of the Cary Library Foundation. We raise private funds to support Cary Library and allow it to do more than what it can do with the municipal funding it receives from the town alone. We fund pages, programs, and possibilities. So by pages, we fund additions to the library's collections, all the hard copy books that you see here, also additions to ebooks, movies, music, periodicals, databases. We fund possibilities, so new initiatives, and also building campaigns. The last building campaign created this lovely space that we're in tonight, the living room space at the library. And we're working very closely with the library as it begins to relaunch its campaign to renovate the children's room and the living room downstairs as well. So on behalf of the Cary Library Foundation, welcome. In addition to that, I am also a volunteer with Lexington Goes Purple. So Lexington Goes Purple is Lexington's annual awareness and fundraiser for the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association is the world's largest nonprofit that supports dementia patients and their caregivers and families. And the Lexington Goes Purple is part of their Longest Day initiative. So the Longest Day is a flexible fundraiser where communities can come together, create programs that really drive awareness to Alzheimer's and other related dementias. So the program that we have in store tonight is part of a lecture series that we have constructed to help educate and inform the community about various aspects of living with Alzheimer's disease. So we are very delighted and privileged to be welcoming Secretary Elizabeth Chen with us this evening. The Secretary has such an illustrious career. I am delighted to introduce her. She began her tenure as Secretary of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs on June 3rd, 2019. So I guess that means tomorrow is your third-year anniversary. The Office of Elder Affairs funds a network of community-based services that helps older adults age and thrive in cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth. Secretary Chen also serves as the chair of the Massachusetts Advisory Council on Alzheimer's disease and all other dementias, so she certainly has a wealth of knowledge to share with us this evening. Previously, she worked in the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and among numerous other things, led an initiative to improve the public health aspects of our delivery care system. And prior to that, she served as president and trustee of the New England College of Optometry and the New England Eye Institute. She's also been and served as president and CEO of two different biotech companies. She has a number of advanced degrees that I think are all sort of interrelated to these efforts. She has an MBA and a master's in public health, as well as a PhD in gerontology. So we are so fortunate that she's here with us this evening. And then as one additional credential, she's also a Lexington resident. So welcome home.
Thank you very much. It's so great to be here and to be able to do something official with my local community. I have lived in Lexington now since 2001. I grew up in Boston, and I've been here now for over 20 years in the same house. It's just such a lovely community, and this is an amazing library. I remember being here with my daughter throughout all those grammar school years downstairs, and the reading, the summer reading.
The summer reading program.
Yes, the summer reading program.
It's just kicking off, I think, just this week.
Absolutely. And I just have so many wonderful memories of this library. So great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So I have a number of questions for the Secretary, and we're just going to have a sort of community conversation. And we also welcome questions from all of you as well. So I'll make sure to save some time for those, but if you do have questions along the way, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask. We're a small group, so we can certainly be very conversational. And in fact, if anybody wants to kind of move up, you can also do that too. I know the chairs on the side are super comfortable, that's the other thing. Okay. So my first question, and I was so interested in this because I'm sort of undergoing a bit of a career change myself, but I saw that you had more than 30 years of experience in the private sector, in both education and then the biotech industry. So I was curious sort of what led you to public service, and in particular, a desire to focus on elder care.
So careers always make sense in the rear view mirror. And they never make sense when you're going forward. So that's the first thing I want to say. And what led me to public service was was a goal I had when I was 25 years old, but I didn't know it and forgot about it. And I just continued to move along, and I had my career in business. And then I just found myself becoming more and more attracted to the public sector and the work in the public sector. And so what reminded me that I was interested in the public sector 25 years ago, well, more than that, when I was 25 years old, was that I was cleaning out my basement. And I found in one of my boxes my business school application. And I don't know why they took me, but I wrote in there that, yeah, I think I'd like to be in business for maybe 20-ish years, and then I think I'd like to go into something in government. So at least I didn't say I want to do it for just 2 years, right? So I was committed to making an investment in business. And I did. I spent 15 years in business, and it was a wonderful, wonderful career. I really enjoyed it. But, we now live long lives thanks to medicine and what we have access to. Certainly those of us, most of us in Lexington, have tremendous access. And so over the course of our lives, we will shift from one career to the next. And I tell young people, always just follow your nose, follow what you are interested in. And the best piece of advice I had when I first got out of college and did not really understand what I wanted to do in life, was that a mentor said to me, just make note of what you read in the newspaper first. And that's your interest. That's your inherent interest. And just keep track of that. And that's where your career should go. I have continued to abide by that. And guess what? My interest has shifted over time with different parts of the newspaper. I still read newspapers in paper form. I like it that way. The digital part, I don't like that part. I saw a thumbs up, I'm glad. So why does a 25-year-old think that she wanted to be in business and then go into public service? Because she had the benefit of receiving public services. I am an immigrant. I came to the United States in 1971 from Taiwan. My parents came with absolutely nothing in their pockets. And I'm one of 5 children. I'm the youngest of 5. And we were sponsored by a family here, old college friends of my parents. And we were sponsored, and they gave us a 1-bedroom apartment to live in for a little while. They gave us clothing, they gave us furniture. They helped us move into subsidized housing in the South End. So, they helped us, they helped my mother enroll in a work training program. She became a key punch operator and worked in a bank for a long time. My father worked in a restaurant. And so you know, as I grew up, you know, I was, you know, I benefited from school lunches, the school nutrition programs, and all through until, you know, the end of high school. When I went to college, I benefited from Pell Grants, and so all along I had received public assistance in some shape or form. And I was grateful for that, and I am grateful for that. I am grateful for what public assistance has been able to do for me, for my family. Truly a hand up, not a hand out. And so, you know, after 15 years or so in business and 10 years in the academic world, and sprinkled in there a few more degrees, I decided, you know, this is the time. This is the time for me to enter public service. And yes, it was 30 years. And I love every day of my work. I love it because I can be a purist in helping people. I have no other agenda than to do what's best and to follow our mission. I don't have to think about making profits. I have to think about not overspending my budget. But I'm fortunate, we are fortunate in that in Massachusetts we have a legislature that is very, very invested in serving older people. So on a, you know, across the US, on a per capita basis, we probably spend more on people over 60 than any other state in the United States. And so, you know, I oversee a budget of about $750 million a year of both federal and state dollars. Most of it are state dollars. And so, how did I end up in elder affairs? You know, serendipity is pretty important in life. I was interested when I went back to school. First of all, in hindsight, I think nobody in their right minds would start a PhD program at age 49, but I did. Because I was interested in older people and how we, as a society, work with, how do we deal with aging? And because I'm bicultural, I see two sides of it, right? My father lives in Taiwan. He's returned to Taiwan, he lives there. And when I'm there, it's a totally different atmosphere. And it's a totally different way of dealing with older people than the way we work with older people here. And, you know, it's not all roses over there, and but it's like more weeds over here. And so, you know, here's a place where I can really make a difference, right? And being in government, just again, serendipity, I first came into the Department of Public Health, and I was perfectly happy in that job, but then the Secretary of Elder Affairs left under the Baker administration, and she served for one term, and she left, and I was there at the Department of Public Health. I just had the right set of credentials and interests, and it just made sense.
And you just stepped on in.
Just stepped on it, and I just went across the street and took on a new job, yes.
Well, I loved what you said about starting a new program at 49. So I have started at 49 a master's in social work degree to work with older adults and families. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see what the adventure is.
Boy, have we got jobs for you.
Yeah. Well, certainly there's a need out there. There's no questions asked.
Absolutely.
Yes, and unfortunately it seems like almost everybody that I meet or speak to has some kind of connection with a close family member or a friend or a loved one or somebody who has suffered from Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. So I was also sort of curious if you wouldn't mind sharing if that was the case for you and sort of how that's informed your thinking.
Well, have learned, I chair the council, the Massachusetts Council for Alzheimer's disease and all dementias. And I chair it in the seat of the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and that's
Okay.
Secretary Sutters. So I don't chair it in the seat as Secretary of Elder Affairs, but rather in the seat of Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Okay.
So I've learned a lot from members on the council. This council is populated by experts in research, experts who have been providing caregiving services, at various state programs, particularly Mass Health, the Medicaid program. The Chief Medical Officer of Mass Health is on this council, and he is a clinician and a geriatrician, and has personally cared for a lot of patients with dementias. And we also have people with lived experience serving on the council, and we have invited family members, caregivers, as well as individuals living with this illness to talk to us about the lived experience. What's it like for you to live with this illness? And what I've come to recognize is that we all get old if we're lucky.
That's true.
We are. We are, because we didn't die from an accident or from an early onset illness or something else, right? We all get old if we're lucky. When we get old, sicknesses come on. Alzheimer's and dementias and related dementias or unrelated dementias are a kind of sickness and a kind of illness. People get cancer, people get heart disease, people have orthopedic illnesses that develop. This is a natural course of aging. And what I would like to see if I could help you reframe what it's like to live with what I want to call a different type of ability that happens, cognitive ability that happens over time. As we grow older, our physical abilities change, and our cognitive abilities change. Our judgment improves. Our ability to deal with crises improve. Right? So change. We are constantly changing. Some things get better, some things get worse. That's just the way life is. And so I hope tonight I can help you reframe what it's like to live with an illness. And so my personal experience, in addition to the council, is that my father is 99 years old and lives with dementia. And when he was first diagnosed with dementia, I think it was kind of, maybe he might have been 94 or 5 or 6. And my reaction was, well, who doesn't at that age? It's just a natural part of what happens. And so how do we approach people who are progressing faster or slower toward that point in our brains? Some people experience early onset dementia and it comes on at the age of 45. For someone like my father, it was 95, and it's still relatively gradual. So how do we as a society and as a community work with that? We acknowledge that this happens. We do not add shame to it. We support the families who have loved ones and who are caring for loved ones. We make ourselves aware of resources, and one most really important resource is caregiver respite.
Mm-hmm.
We need to recognize the burden that caregivers have on themselves, and that it is a weight. It is an additional responsibility to bringing up children, to having responsibilities for your household, to, in Lexington, taking out the trash every week, to, everything, right? My car needs to be serviced, and I just haven't got time to do that. So it's, this is in addition to what I call normal life stuff. And yet, caregiving has no break, And when we have empty nested and our children have flown off, we think we've been relieved of caregiving, and we're not accustomed to having it coming back. And I think that's a piece. So when I talk about caregiving in front of, and now caregiving is actually recognized as a role by corporations, which is wonderful. And so when I talk to corporations and companies, recently I talked to a group at Deloitte, and I said, I hope everyone will have the privilege of becoming a caregiver for a parent one day, because it's hard, just like parenting, but there are moments of just joy and self-growth and revelation that comes from it. And what we need to do as a community is to acknowledge and help each other to provide respite for the caregiver.
So you mentioned the Alzheimer's Council, and I think they've identified 7 different priority areas. I have them
we're
listed
ambitious.
here. Yes, a lot of different things going on. Number 1 is the caregiver support and public awareness. Number 2 is diagnosis and service navigation, equitable access and care, physical infrastructure, public health infrastructure, quality of care, and research. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit, maybe not about each, because we have limited time.
I'm not going to talk about each one.
But just sort of, what are the maybe the near-term successes that you see from those?
So first thing I want to do is introduce Pam McLeod over there. Raise your hand, Pam. She is the content expert as well as the project manager, program manager, who's been making this work and these 7 work groups. And each of these work groups has sub-work groups. And you can imagine how hard this is, because they're populated by volunteers, and it's not Pam's only job. She has some other things, a lot of other big, heavy things to do too. So, but Pam is very much the expert and the person behind the scenes. And I would also say that I would recommend that you go to the state website to look up the annual report that we have produced and that has just been issued. This is our 2nd annual report for this council, and it enumerates our successes. And so the work of the council is never going to be done. And we identified these work groups from talking to council members, talking to family caregivers in our panels, talking to people with lived experience. What do we need to do? How do we put in place the right tools so that we help individuals living with dementia as well as their caregivers and their families? And so that's how we came up with all of this. And the first thing people told us was, when my husband got diagnosed, I was in shock and just didn't know where to go, and at every step I don't know where to go or what to do. So, caregiver support, public awareness, really, really, really important. Diagnosis and navigation. And so we also heard, I started to see symptoms in my wife, and it was just so hard trying to find somebody who could give us a diagnosis, because, you know, Alzheimer's and a lot of dementias are a diagnosis of exclusion. You don't have this, you don't have that, and you don't have this, and so we think it's dementia, right? And so it takes a long time, it takes a lot of visits to the doctor. And then on top of that, to get a definitive diagnosis, you have to see a neurologist, and we have a shortage of neurologists. And so it's hard. It is hard. And so we work on, all right, how do we do this? And how do we develop a tool so that primary care providers can do this? So your family doctor can do at least the initial diagnosis. And so we're trying to sort of knock down these barriers, right? Equitable access and care. When we think about equity, it's not just about income or the color of people's skin. It's about, you know, we think about where you live, we think about where services are delivered, we think about all different things, and we try to level the playing field. And this is also difficult work, but work that we must do, because there are populations that are that really disproportionate. There's like a disproportionate prevalence of Alzheimer's and dementias in certain populations, and scientifically we don't really understand why yet. But as social service providers, we need to just acknowledge that this is what it is, and then how do we put the services in the right places so that people can access them, and provide services in the right languages so that people can access them. And by the way, a lot of the diagnostics are skewed toward English speakers, are skewed toward higher education, are not so accurate if you can't hear, or if you are highly educated and like to do puzzles, you can probably outsmart them. So we have to remember that too.
Right. That's a very good point. My mother had experienced Alzheimer's, and a lot of the cognitive tests at the beginning were things like say the alphabet from backwards to forwards, or repeat 5 English words. I'm going to mix them up. So if you're not a native language English speaker, that has to be a challenge.
It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not possible. And so, all right, the physical infrastructure. When there is cognitive impairment, spatial relations can go. And we're just not we don't think about that when we do design for building a building. For individuals with dementia, one thing that could happen is a shiny surface looks like water. And we don't necessarily take this into account. And so there are universal design features, and there are also dementia-friendly design features that can be incorporated. And dementia-friendly design is friendly design for everybody. It really is. Universal design is universal design. Mm-hmm. It's good for somebody in a wheelchair. It's good for people who are not.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see what else. Public health infrastructure, that's all part of this piece, and the quality of care. There's variation in quality of care, certainly. This is typical, and we try to reduce the variation. And then research, we're trying to broaden research so that it's not just about therapeutics and treatments, but it's about how can primary care providers do a reliable diagnostic. That's simple. It's about how do we include non-English speakers to develop a test? How do we include people who are hearing impaired so that we can develop a test that meets all populations?
Great. Definitely a challenge and definitely a lot of work ahead, I'm sure.
That's why I say it will never end.
Yes.
And
yes.
it's a living document. It's a living, we meet quarterly, and in between, there are a lot of meetings of the work groups, and we just keep the thing moving. That's how you make system change anyway. I mean, it's consistent pressure on an agenda.
Mm-hmm. Just pushing it all forward. So just kind of maybe jumping sort of from the broad to a little bit more narrow. And you had mentioned this, when somebody has a close loved one that's diagnosed with the dementia, you're sort of caught up in what do I do next? Where do I find information? There's so much information. Do you have advice for somebody in that situation?
Yes, I do. Your first stop should be your local, what we call ASAP, which is the Aging Services Access Point. That's your first stop. And these are regional offices for us, for Elder Affairs. And our local region is Minuteman Senior Services. And that's the first call you should make. You should identify yourself as a caregiver. And the state funds a caregiver support program. And we also, there's a federal program called Options Counseling. And options counselors are situated in these regions, and they can sit with you. It's a free service. We fund it. They can sit with you and talk with you about the different kind of options given your particular circumstance.
That's fantastic to know about.
Yes, so that's your first stop.
Yeah.
You can also call the Alzheimer's Association helpline. Pam has a whole lot of resources in her manila folder over there. And so I encourage you to meet Pam at the end of this. So, those are your two best resources. And if you don't live in Lexington, you can, it doesn't matter. If you call the wrong region, they'll refer you to the correct region. So that's all I can say.
Great. So sort of bridging off of that a little bit, I think the other concern that occurs to people is the financial cost. So that's great that there is some free resources available to get people started. But are there financial resources or people available to kind of try to help you figure out what can I afford? What can my loved one afford? And if we can't afford a necessary service, what do we do?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Elder economic security is an area that we focus on at Elder Affairs. It's important. And caregiver economic security is important too. Too many people decide to quit their jobs in the middle-aged years to care for a parent, only to find that it's very difficult to come back in to the workforce. And so that's in part why caregiver support is so important, because people quit their jobs because they feel burnt out, right? And so there are resources, and that if you're connected to your to Minuteman or to the Council on Aging, we have, for example, a program called Prescription Advantage, where we help people reduce the cost of their prescriptions. And there's an income scale associated with it, but you don't have to be qualified for Medicaid. It meets above Medicaid levels. There is the SHINE program, as people turn 65, they definitely should talk to our SHINE counselors. And there are a whole host of other ways in which we at Elder Affairs can be helpful. I always want to do more. And we continue to look at ways in which we can do more. And it's a combination of public subsidy with private pay on some income scale. And it's a tough knot to unwind, particularly for the middle income group, because middle income pushes you above a lot of the public subsidies like Medicaid and Mass Health, but you're just under, so that you can't fully afford private pay. And we have, in our regions, home care is a negotiated rate. We have income-associated co-pays that are, that reach income levels above Mass Health rates. And so there are possibilities, and we continue to work on broadening that piece.
Trying to strengthen that.
Yeah. We continue to work on that.
It's complicated, I'm sure, too, because prognosis is so different for everybody. So it's hard to know, is it a couple years, is it 10 years, is it 15 years? What is the amount that you're trying to fund, and how to manage that? It's tricky.
It is, and I would say that, you want to use the group programs as much as possible. There are adult day health programs, and there are supportive day programs. And the difference is that adult day health will do medications, and supportive day doesn't. It's mostly just activities, and it might be 3 to 6 hours as opposed to 12, or it's just slightly different. And I would say you just take it one step at a time and try to do the group stuff first.
That makes a lot of sense. I wanted to pick up on one other thing that you mentioned, which is kind of the physical infrastructure. And I had come across this concept of dementia-friendly communities. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that means to be a dementia-friendly community, and as a Lexington resident, is that something that you think is a good fit for Lexington? What would we do to do that?
I tie it to age and dementia-friendly communities. And there's a whole process where you do a self-study and the town engages the community to identify your goals. And then you proactively move along these goals. And Pam, is Lexington a dementia-friendly community? It is not.
I see
Opportunity.
I see it here.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
To answer that.
I'm Hamali Shah, the Senior Services Director with the Lexington. We are working towards it. We did the age-friendly assessment in 2017, so we have taken some action steps for age-friendly. So the dementia-friendly is part of our next steps. COVID sort of took a break naturally, and us progressing with that, but we're working towards it.
Oh, that's very exciting. That's great to know. So we'll talk afterwards. That's great. So wonderful. So I know that I'm cognizant of time. I'm looking at my watch over here because I know you have a hard stop. I'm wondering if anybody has any questions or comments or thoughts that they want to share.
Yes, hi. My name is Vic Parker. My mother My mother had Alzheimer's, and after she was diagnosed, one of the issues that we faced as a family was getting her affairs in order in terms of powers of attorney and healthcare, Proxy, and all of that kind of thing. I think in my family, we barely made it on time before she would have been considered not competent to even sign forms. And I'm wondering, in all of these wonderful resources, if any of these address that issue with families.
Yes. What you've touched on is a very important topic. And it's a topic for my PhD dissertation, as a matter of fact, which is end-of-life care planning. And I will share with you that when my 17-year-old daughter went off to Australia for her post-junior summer abroad, I said, here's a healthcare proxy. And this is what it means. And she wasn't old enough yet to sign it herself. But when she turned 18, I had her sign it. We have to start when people are 18. It becomes habit. It just becomes part of, like paying your insurance bill, your house insurance bill, your car insurance. Is your healthcare proxy up to date? Is the person you've named in your healthcare proxy the one that you want to make your decisions? As you get older, when you think about planning, there are wonderful resources to help people think about what they want if they have a serious illness. There's a program called, there's a kit called the 5 Wishes. What are your 5 wishes if you were faced with a serious life-limiting illness? But we should not be afraid of talking about planning for medical emergencies, planning for a time when we cannot make medical decisions ourselves. So, in the United States, when an individual turns 18, parents aren't making those decisions in the healthcare. You can't make a healthcare decision for your 18-year-old. In particular, if there's conflict between parents, that person who's 18 has the right to make their own decisions, and if there isn't any instructions left behind, it's complicated. It's complicated. And historically, I can point to a number of cases where they've gone to court and they've gone to the Supreme Court on life-extending measures.
One thing that I was surprised to learn about, maybe everybody here already knows, is the MOLS form, which stands for, I'm sure somebody in here knows what it stands for, the Massachusetts
Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, yes.
Yes, which it kind of breaks things down more granularly in terms of what life-extending treatments that you'd want, and then it's on file with your healthcare system and your doctor. So whenever anybody's asked me questions, that's what I always stress, is just make sure you sit down with your doctor, fill out the MOLST form, and then keep that updated, because things change. Your thoughts might change and evolve about what kind of life-extending treatments you might want.
Yes, and we're moving toward making that into an electronic format. It'll take us a couple of years. And Pam is working on with that too. She gets all the tough projects.
Pam sounds very busy.
Pam is very, very busy. We're trying to get Pam a few more hands and feet to help her. But Pam is my go-to person on what I call the really tough ones that involved a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different constituents, a lot of different streams of work that have to work together to get to a place. So in a couple of years, that's going to be electronic, and the idea is that that form and those wishes should be accessible to the ambulance driver who showed up at your house, should be accessible to, right now it's posted on somebody's refrigerator,
Yep.
but it should be accepted to, all along the continuum of care. Somebody should be able to reach in the cloud and see what the most recent wishes are.
Any other thoughts or questions? Queries?
That note on the refrigerator is important because that's what the ambulance people ask for. There's a form you can get from the fire department. Goes right on your, goes right on your refrigerator and has your vital information.
And then sometimes what happens is it goes with people into the ambulance, and then it flies away between the ambulance and the emergency room. It disappears.
But the fire department hands it out on the second day.
They handed it out?
They hand it, you can get it.
Oh, interesting.
It's called File of Life.
Yeah, file of life.
Ah, okay.
File of life.
File of life.
You put your information, it's a form.
Could you use the microphone, please?
I think it's called the File of Life, and it was passed out on Discovery Day. Is that what you're saying, from the fire department? It may be something. Something that
Yeah, we have it at the community center.
the community center has it as well.
Well, a friend of mine, they had to call the ambulance, they asked her about it, so I called the fire department, went out and picked 12 of them off and gave them to my friends.
Thank you. Kate, did you have another?
Yeah, I did have a question.
Great.
I was wondering if you could give me some resources to assess maybe the quality of some of the care facilities. I know that I've been going through with my father, he's 91 and my mom's 89, and she's in, anyway, she's under care. She's being transitioned out of like a psychiatric geriatric ward. And my dad and I are trying to figure out certain places that would fit with her, but it's very hard. If you go on the web, like, they're all about a 3. You know what I mean? It's really hard to kind of pinpoint the best place that would fit, and there's people out there who will help you, but just individually you feel like you want to do it yourself. And with COVID, it's made it even harder because they won't let you in to look at the places. So if you could give me some insight to how to go about that, that would be great. Thank
So
you.
you are looking for a long-term care setting that provides medical care as well?
So I would be looking for like a nursing home type care.
Okay, so a nursing home with a mental health. No?
You know what, I think that's what happens with Alzheimer's patients. This has been my experience, in terms of, how they
I know
diagnose.
it's not a mental health.
And it's not really
yes.
that, you know what I'm
No.
saying? That's not what
I
it
know.
is, and when you have a conversation with them, they're
I-
like, but that's what it is, and that's a
yes.
whole other.
It's disappointing.
Yep.
Sometimes a little adjustment to the medications will make the distress go away. Sometimes a change in the living environment removes the distress. And what people see on the face of it is a mental health, a behavioral health issue, but in fact, it is an unexpressed frustration about the situation, unexpressible frustration. So, tough question. Do you have Pam? I look to Pam.
There are some guides.
There are some guides available on what to ask and what to look for when you tour a nursing home or when you tour an assisted living facility or a memory unit. Because it really is up to you to think about what's best for your loved one, where they can really thrive, and everybody is different. So And I find, just because I had 2 parents with Alzheimer's, I found guides like that very helpful as I went around to different places. And in fact, the geriatrician that my parents went to, that my mother went to, said, no, she has to go to a nursing home, and I won't sign this. I wanted her to go into assisted living. And he said, I will not sign this. And I said, I'm not leaving until you sign this. And I made the right decision because it was, and she was in a geriatric psych unit as well in a hospital. And because once she got to that assisted living, she was like, she was 20 years younger and she was so happy. So it's hard. You have to really understand what your loved one really needs, where they can thrive. And there are guides available. So in the Elder Affairs website, I don't know if your parent has dementia, but it doesn't matter, because in the Elder Affairs website, there's a section on Alzheimer's disease. You just click on that, and in there, there's some guidance on questions you can ask nursing homes as well as assisted living facilities.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions? We're nearing the end of our time.
I do want to acknowledge again that it's hard being a caregiver.
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge that right here with you. And that you do have to do your own work, right? And it's frustrating because at one level, you just want someone to give you the answer and to solve the problem. But at another level, when someone does that for you, it's the wrong solution. It's often the wrong set of solutions, because they don't know you. They don't know the person they don't know your loved one. And so it's a hard process. And as I said, caregiving is hard. Caregiving is hard, and it's important to just be in the space and acknowledge that. You know, I was a caregiver for my mother for many years, a primary caregiver, and it was really, I had many moments of frustration. And she just died 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so, and a good friend of mine said, providing care for your parent and being there in their last days of life is the last stage of growing up. And, you know, it's really true. It's really true. It's a privilege, but it's painful.
I think that's true. That's so important to acknowledge and to accept. And I think just give yourself, if you're in that situation, you know, grace and patience, I think is really important. So thank you so much for being here this evening. We do have some other Lexington Goes Purple events coming up. We have some flyers in the back on the credenza behind the couch. In addition, Faith Parker is one of our committee co-chairs, and Joyce Murphy's here as well. I'm also here. I'm happy to talk about some of our other initiatives. I'm very excited to hear about Lexington might be a dementia-friendly community, so I'd love to hear that too. So if anybody does have time to stick around and have some more questions for us, I definitely have a few moments, but I know the secretary has to leave at 8 o'clock, so I'm being protective of her time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.